46. Discover active relaxation. There is a huge difference between active relaxation and passive relaxation. When we play video games, play computer games, play cards, work in the garden, walk the dog, go into a chat room, or play chess, we are interacting with the unexpected and our minds are responding.
All
of these activities increase personal creativity and intellectual motivation. They are all active pursuits. Active relaxation refreshes and restores the mind. It keeps it flexible and tone for thinking. Great thinkers have known this secret for a long
time.
Winston Churchill used to paint to relax. Albert Einstein played the violin. They could relax one part of the brain while stimulating another. When they returned to workday pursuits, they were fresher and sharper than ever. Most of us try to deaden the mind in order to relax. We rent mindless videos, read pulp fiction, drink, smoke, and eat until we're foggy and bloated. The problem with this form of relaxation is that it dulls our spirit and makes it hard to come back to consciousness. I accidentally discovered the restorative powers of video and computer games when I played some with my then 9-year-old son Bobby.
What
began as a way to make him happy and spend time with him became a brain-challenging pursuit. The complexity of computer football, basketball, and hockey games now rivals chess and the New York Times Sunday crossword puzzle. It requires stimulating recreational thinking. Thinking is the hardest work we do, said Henry Ford, which is why so few people ever do it. But when we find ways to link thinking to recreation, our lives get richer. We become players in the game of life, and not just spectators. 47. Make today a masterpiece. Most of us think our lives accumulate. We think they are adding up to
something.
We think of our lives as being strung together like a long, smoky train so that we can add new freight cars when we're feeling right, and dump the others on a siding somewhere when we're not. But when basketball legend John Wooden's father said to him, "Make each day your masterpiece," Wooden knew something profound. Life is
now.
Life is not later on. And the more we hypnotize ourselves into thinking we have all the time in the world to do what we want to do, the more we sleepwalk past life's finest opportunities. Self-motivation flows from the importance we attach to today. John Wooden was the most successful college basketball coach of all
time.
His UCLA teams won 10 national championships in a 12-year time span. Wooden created a major portion of his coaching and living philosophy from one thought, a single sentence passed on to him by his father when Wooden was a little boy: make each day your masterpiece. While other coaches would try to gear their players toward important games in the future, Wooden always focused on today.
His practice
sessions at UCLA were every bit as important as any championship
game.
In his philosophy, there was no reason not to make today the proudest day of your life. There was no reason not to play as hard in practice as you do in a game. He wanted every player to go to bed each night thinking, "Today I was at my best." Most of us, however, don't want it to be this way. If someone asks us if today can be used as a model to judge our entire life by, we would shriek, "Oh no, it isn't one of my better days.
Give me a year or two and
I'll live a day, I'm certain of it, that you can use to represent my life." The key to personal transformation is in your willingness to do very tiny things, but to do them today. Transformation is not an all-or-nothing game, it's a work in progress.
A
little touch here and a small touch there is what makes your day and, therefore, your life great. Today is a microcosm of your entire life. It is your whole life in miniature. You were born when you woke up and you'll die when you go to sleep. It was designed this way so that you
could live your whole life in a day.
48. Enjoy all your problems. Every solution has a problem. You can't have one without the other. So why do we say that we hate problems? Why do we claim to want a hassle-free existence?
When
Someone is emotionally sick. Why do we say, he's got problems? Deep down, where our wisdom lives, we know that problems are good.
For us.
When my daughter's teacher talks to me during open house and tells me that my daughter is going to be working more problems in math than she worked last year, I think that's wonderful. Why do I think it's wonderful when my daughter gets more problems to solve? If I think problems are a problem, because somehow we know that problems are good for our children.
By
solving problems, our kids will become more self-sufficient. They'll trust their own minds more. They'll see themselves as problem solvers. Because we ourselves are so superstitious about our own problems, we tend to run from them rather than solve them. We have demonized problems to such a degree that they are like monsters that live under the
bed.
And by not solving them during the day, we tremble over them at
night.
When people took their problems to the legendary insurance giant W. Clement Stone, he used to shout out, "You've got a problem? That's great." It's a wonder he wasn't shot by someone, given our culture's deep superstition about problems. But problems are not to be feared. Problems are not curses. Problems are simply tough games for the athletes of the mind, and true athletes always long to get a game going. In The Road Less Traveled, one of M. Scott Peck's central themes is that problems call forth our wisdom and our courage. One of the best ways to approach a problem is in a spirit of play, the same way you approach a chess game or a challenge to play one-on-one. Playground basketball. One of my favorite ways to play with a problem, especially one that seems hopeless, is to ask myself, what is a funny way to solve this problem? What would be a hilarious solution?
That
question never fails to open up fresh new avenues of thought. Every problem in your life, said Richard Bach, author of Illusions, carries a gift inside it. He is right, but we have to be thinking that way first, or the gift will never appear. In his groundbreaking studies of natural healing, Dr. Andrew Weil suggests that we even regard illness as a gift, because illness can be such a powerful stimulus to change. He writes in Spontaneous Healing, perhaps it is the only thing that can force some people to resolve their deepest conflicts. Successful patients often come to regard it as the greatest opportunity they ever had for personal growth and development, truly a gift. Seeing illness as a misfortune, especially one that is undeserved, may obstruct the healing system. Coming to see the illness as a gift that allows you to grow may unlock it. If you see your problems as curses, the motivation you're looking for in life will be hard to find. If you learn to love the opportunities your problems present, then your motivational energy will rise. 49. Remind your mind. Perhaps you have noted an idea in this book, or another recent book, that you've read that you want to hold on to. It might be an idea that you knew the moment you saw it would always be useful to you. You might even have underlined it for future reference. But what if the book goes on the shelf or gets loaned to a friend and is forevermore out of sight and out of mind? This is a very common experience, and there is a remedy. Start treating self-motivational ideas as if they were songs. You can find ways to rewind these ideas so they'll play again and again until you can't get them out of your head. That's how belief systems are restructured to suit our goals. Place the thought you want to remember into the jingle track in your brain so that it can't get out. You can create a new self by learning the beliefs you want to live.
By one thought at a time.
Learn these thoughts as you would the lyrics for a song you had to perform on stage. A friend of mine used to learn his parts in musicals by placing index cards with song lyrics all over his office, home, and bathroom mirror. He sometimes had them on the dashboard of his car.
Why?
He was making a conscious visual effort to reach the backside of his own mind. The trick is to keep this motivation going, to deliberately feed your spirit with the optimistic ideas you want to live by. Anytime a thought, sentence, or paragraph inspires you or opens up your thinking, you need to capture it like a butterfly in a net and later release it into your own field of consciousness. For me, Discovering an exciting idea in a book or magazine is like a true peak experience. It makes the world bright and incomprehensible. I get that tingle in my spine. I get that oh yes feeling. Why am I this lucky? And the more I deliberately fill my mind with the words and phrases that originally stirred the peak experience, the easier it is to remember that life is good. This, writes Colin Wilson in New Pathways in Psychology, is why people who have a peak experience can go on repeating them, because it is simply a matter of reminding yourself of something you have already seen and which you know to be real. In this sense, it is like any other recognition that suddenly dawns on you. For example, the recognition of the greatness of some composer or artist whom you had formerly found difficult or incomprehensible, or the recognition of how to solve a certain problem. Once such a recognition dawns, it is easy to re-establish contact with it, because it is there like some possession, waiting for you to return to it. During my talks on self-motivation, one of the questions I'm asked most often is, how do I keep this going? People say, I love what I've learned today, but I've often gone to seminars that got me motivated. And then a few days later, I was back to my old pessimistic self, doing exactly what I used to do. If I were in the mood to be blunt, I would answer the question this way. Why, if you love what you've learned about self-motivation, would you ask me how to keep it going in your life? The person in this room best equipped to answer your question is
You.
So I'll ask you, how will you keep this going in your life? I bet you could give me 10 ways you could do it. And I bet that if this were a foreign language you had to learn, you would set aside a certain amount of time each day to review it, to read it out loud, and to make certain you learned it. I bet you'd buy tapes or CDs for your car, and even arrange small study groups. So the real question is this: is mastering the art of motivation as important as learning another language? Even a single phrase placed prominently in a home or office can have a huge impact on your life. In Arnold Schwarzenegger's childhood home, in a poor town in Austria, his father framed and hung the simple words, joy through strength. It's not hard to see what effect that idea had on Arnold's life. Once while I was attending a Werner Erhard seminar, I had some free time during a break, so I wrote myself a letter. I put down all the ideas I wanted to remember from the seminar, and I sealed them in an envelope. I took it home, and a month later I mailed it to myself. When I opened it at work and read it, it was like a fresh experience all over again. I was so impressed by how effective this was for me that I employed the idea in one of my own seminars. I had everyone in the audience write out the important insights they'd received and what they intended to do differently in their lives from this moment on. When the people were finished, I asked them to seal the letters into the envelopes I'd provided and address the envelopes to themselves. I told them I would hold them for a month and then mail them all. The reports I got back were remarkable. Some people said seeing those thoughts written to themselves in their own handwriting brought the whole seminar back to them. They felt a rush of excitement and a new commitment to take action. Are you willing to remind yourself to treat yourself to your own best thoughts? Are you willing to set visual traps and ambushes so you'll always see words and thoughts you know you want to remember? 50. Get down and get small. The fewer goals you set each day, the more you feel pushed around by people and events that are beyond your control. You suffer from a sense of powerlessness. Rather than creating the reality you want, you are only reacting to the world around you. You have much more control over the activities of your day than you realize. By increasing your conscious use of small objectives, you will see the larger objectives coming into reality. Most people participating in the free enterprise system have become thoroughly convinced of the power of setting large and specific long-range goals for themselves. Career goals, yearly goals, and monthly performance goals are always on the mind of a person with ambition. But often those people overlook altogether the power of small goals set during the day that give energy to the day and a sense of achieving a lot of small wins along the way. In his psychological masterpiece, Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi refers to large goals as outcome goals and small goals as process goals. The beauty of process goals is that they are always within your immediate power to achieve. For example, you might set a process goal of making 4 important telephone calls before lunch.
On
A sheet of paper, you make 4 boxes, and as you make each call, you fill in a box. And when the 4 are made, you file the paper in your goal folder and go enjoy lunch. Because you've earned it. You can set process goals, for example, before a conversation with a person. I want to find these 3 things out. I want to ask these 4 questions. I want to make these 2 requests, and I want to pay my client 1 compliment before I leave. Process goals give you total focus. When you are constantly setting process goals, you are in more control of your day, and you feel a sense of skillful self-motivation. At the end of the day or the beginning of the next day, you can check your progress toward your outcome goals. You can adjust your process goals to take you closer to the outcomes you want, and always keep the 2 in harmony. Let's say it's now the end of a long, hard day. You have a half hour before you have to go home. If you're not in the habit of setting process goals, you might say, I guess I ought to do some paperwork or make a call or 2 before I go home. You look at the pile of paper on your desk, or you mindlessly thumb through phone numbers, and all of a sudden someone comes by your desk to chat. Because you have nothing specific to do, you engage in conversation, and before you know it, the half hour is gone, and you have to go home. Even though you didn't leave anything specific unfinished, you still have that vague feeling of having wasted time. Now, what happens if you use that half hour to set and achieve a process goal? Before I go home tonight, I'm going to send out 2 good letters of introduction with all my marketing material included. Now you have a process goal and only a half hour in which to do it. When the person comes by your desk to chat, you tell him you'll have to talk to him later because you've got some things that have to get out by 5. People who get into the swing of setting small goals all day long report a much higher level of consciousness and energy. It's as if they are athletes constantly coaching themselves through an ongoing game. They are happier people because their day is being created by the power inside their own minds and not by the power of the world around them. 51. Advertise to yourself. I often start the day by drawing 4 circles on a blank piece of paper. The circles represent my day, today, my month, my year, and my life. Inside each circle, I write down what I want. It can be a dollar figure, it can be anything, and the goals can change from day to day. It doesn't matter. There is no way to get this process wrong. But by writing the goals down, I am like an airline pilot who is consulting his or her map prior to takeoff. I am orienting my mind to what I am up to in life. I am reminding myself of what I really want. We wouldn't think, before an airline flight, of poking our heads into the cabin and saying to the pilot, just take me anywhere. Yet that's how we live our days when we don't check the map. Sometimes in my seminars on motivation, people observe that they don't have time for goal setting. But the 4-circle system I described takes only 4 minutes. Once during a workshop on goal setting, I asked if anyone in the audience had any interesting experiences with visualization. We had been discussing sports psychologist Rob Gilbert's observation that losers visualize the penalties of failure and winners visualize the rewards of success. A young couple shared a story about how they had wanted for years to buy their own home, but never got the money together to do it. Then one day, after reading about the practice of treasure mapping, posting pictures of what you want in life somewhere in your office or home, they decided to put a picture on their refrigerator of a new house, the kind they dreamed of owning. In less than 9 months, we'd made the down payment and moved in, said the amazed husband. His wife added, alongside the photo of the house, we eventually put a little thermometer that we filled in as our savings toward a down payment grew. I have heard many similar stories about how treasure mapping has worked for people. I have also read books and attended seminars that explain why. Most of them discuss what happens to the subconscious mind when you send it a picture of something you want, because the subconscious mind only communicates with vividly imagined or real pictures. It will not seek to bring into your life anything you can't
Picture.
Without advertising our goals to ourselves, we can lose sight of them altogether. It is possible to go an entire week or 2 or 3 without thinking about our main goals in life. We get caught up in reacting and responding to people and circumstances, and we simply forget to think about our own purpose. I have an example of how this practice worked in my life. 3 years ago, I was interested in giving more seminars on the subject of fundraising. I had co-authored a book called Relaxation, Revolutionary Fundraising with University of Arizona Development Director Michael Basoff. We had done some successful seminars on the subject, and I wanted to do more. So on the wall of my bedroom, I put up a white poster board, and on that board, I put up a lot of pictures and index cards with my goals on them. I wanted to have all those goals in front of me when I woke up each morning, even though I only spent a minute or 2 looking at the board each day. One of the index cards I had pinned to my goal board simply contained the bold markered letters, ASU. It was almost lost among the hodgepodge of photos and goals I'd covered the board with, and I'm certain I only barely noticed it each morning as I got up. I put it up there because I thought it would be great if I could give seminars to Arizona State University, especially now that I was living in the Phoenix area.
I
really thought nothing more of it. One day at the offices of the corporate training company where I worked, I was asked to shake the hand of a new employee, Jerry.
I
asked Jerry to come in and sit down. We talked in my office for a few minutes about his joining the company. I asked him about his family, and he casually mentioned that his parents were living in town and that his mother worked at ASU. Normally, that would have meant nothing. ASU is a very well-known and oft-mentioned presence in the Phoenix area. But something went off in my mind when he said that, and I know in hindsight that something was my daily view of my goal board. My ears perked up when he said ASU, and I asked him, "What does your mother do at ASU?" "She's the chief administrative assistant to the development director at the ASU Foundation," he said. "They're in charge of all the fundraising at the university." I really brightened at that point, and I told Jerry about my past work in fundraising at the University of Arizona in Tucson and how I'd always wanted to do similar work at ASU. He said he'd be delighted to introduce me to his mother and to the development director himself. Within a month, ASU fundraisers were attending my seminar in relationship, and I had realized one of the goals on my board. I honestly believe that if I had not had a goal board up in my bedroom, Jerry's mention of ASU would have gone right past me. And this illustrates something important. We need to advertise our own goals to ourselves. Otherwise, our psychic energy is spread too thin across the spectrum of things that aren't that important to us. 52. Think outside the box. Once I attended a new business proposal presentation by Bob Curther, in which he had his prospective customers all play a little 9-dot game that illustrated to them that the solutions to puzzles are often simple to see if we think in unconventional ways. As people laughed and tore up their puzzles in frustration when Curther showed them the solution, he stood up to make his final point. "We restrict our thinking for no good reason," said Curther. "We do things simply because that's the way we always did them. I want you to know that our commitment in serving your company is to always look outside the box for the most innovative solutions possible to our problems. We'll never do something just because that's the way we have always done it." To many business leaders pitching a lucrative account, this kind of puzzle-solving exercise would simply be considered a clever presentation. But to Bob Curther, it was a symbolic expression of his whole life in business. Once, on a Xerox-sponsored trip in Cancun, Mexico, Bob and Mike spent the day out in treacherous waters on a fishing boat. After coming ashore, they retired to Carlos O'Brien's restaurant for tequila and beer, and a period of reflection on their lives in sales thus far. We knew that as well as we had done, we would never own boats like the one we were just in if we remained at Xerox, said Bob. We talked about possibilities in the bar, and it wasn't long before we noticed some black t-shirts on the wall with the word infinity on them. Then, for more than 2 hours, Mike and I discussed just what the word infinity
meant.
Out of that discussion, a dream was born, a dream that took shape in the form of infinity communications. Bob Curther and his brother believed that there was one vital area in which Xerox was underperforming, and that was customer service. What if, they asked, a company's commitment to the customer was infinite? Not boxed in, but unlimited in its possibilities for creative service? With that concept as motivation, the two brothers formed Infincom, short for Infinity Communications, in the state of Arizona, and within 10 years they grew from 6 employees and no customers into a $50 million business with more than 500 employees. And for the past 3 years straight, the Arizona Business Gazette has ranked Infincom the #1 office equipment company in Arizona, ahead of Xerox. All of us tend to look at our challenges from inside a box.
We take what
we've done in the past and put it in front of our eyes and then try to envision what we call the future. But that restricts our future.
With
that restricted view, the best the future can be is a new and better
past.
Great motivational energy occurs when we get out of the box and assume that the possibilities for creative ideas are infinite.
To realize the
best possible future for yourself, don't look at it through a box containing your own past. 53. Keep thinking, keep thinking. Motivation comes from thought. Every act we take is preceded by a thought that inspires that act.
And
when we quit thinking, we lose the motivation to act. We eventually slip into pessimism, and the pessimism leads to even less thinking. And so it
goes.
A downward spiral of negativity and passivity, feeding on itself, like cancer. I like to use this example in my seminars to illustrate the power of continuing to think. Let's say a pessimist has made up his mind to clean his garage on a Saturday morning. He wakes up and walks out to the garage and opens the door and is shocked to see just how much of a mess it is. Forget this, the pessimist says with disgust. No one could clean this garage in one day. And at that point the pessimist slams the garage door shut and goes back inside to do something else. Pessimists are all-or-nothing thinkers. They think in catastrophic absolutes. They are either going to do something perfectly or not at all. Now, let's look at how the optimist would face the same problem.
He
wakes up on the same morning and goes to the same garage and sees the same mess and even utters the same first words to himself. Forget this. No one could clean this garage in one day. But this is where the key difference between an optimist and a pessimist shows itself. Instead of going back into the house, the optimist keeps thinking. Okay, so I can't clean the whole garage, he says. What could I do? That would make a difference. He looks for a while and thinks things over. Finally, it occurs to him that he could break the garage down into 4 sections and do just one section today. For sure I'll do one today, he says, and even if I only do one section each Saturday, I'll have the whole garage in great shape before the month is over. A month later, you see a pessimist with a filthy garage and an optimist with a clean garage. There was a woman in one of my seminars in Las Vegas who told me that this one concept, the optimist habit of looking for partial solutions, had made an interesting difference in her life. I used to come home from work and look at my kitchen and just throw up my hands and curse at it and do nothing at all, she told me.
I'd
think the exact same thing as the pessimist in your garage story.
Then I
decided to just pick a small part of the kitchen and do that and that area only. It might be a certain counter or just the sink. By doing just one small part each night. I never resent the work. It's never overwhelming, and my kitchen always looks decent. Pessimists like to set their problems aside. They think so negatively about doing the whole thing perfectly that they end up doing nothing at all. The optimist always does a little something. She or he always takes in action and always feels like progress is being made. Because pessimists have a habit of thinking it's hopeless or nothing can be done, they quit thinking too soon. An optimist may have the same initial negative feelings about a project, but he or she keeps thinking until smaller possibilities open up. This is why Alan Loy McGuinness, in his inspiring book The Power of Optimism, refers to optimists as tough-minded. The pessimist, as far as the use of the human mind goes, is a quitter. Recent studies show, says McGuinness, that optimists excel in school, have better health, make more money, establish long and happy marriages, stay connected to their children, and perhaps even live longer. To witness one of the most profound illustrations of the practical effectiveness of optimism in American history, you'll want to rent the movie Apollo 13. Although the job of bringing those astronauts back from the far side of the moon looked daunting and overwhelming, the job was accomplished one small task at a time. The people at Mission Control in Houston who saved the astronauts' lives did so because even in the face of impossible technological breakdowns, they kept on thinking. They never gave up. They looked for partial solutions and they declared that they would string these partial page_115, page 116 solutions together one at a time until they brought the men home safely. While the astronauts' lives were still in doubt, there was one glaring pessimist in Houston Ground Control who made the comment that he feared that Apollo 13 might become the worst space disaster in American history. The ground commander in Houston turned to him and said with optimism and anger, "On the contrary, sir, I see Apollo 13 as being our finest hour." And he turned out to be right, which illustrates the life-or-death effectiveness of optimistic thinking. Whenever you feel pessimistic or overwhelmed, remember to keep thinking. The more you think about a situation, the more you will see small opportunities for action, and the more small actions you take, the more optimistic energy you will receive. An optimist keeps thinking and self-motivates. A pessimist quits thinking and then just quits. In the Broadway musical South Pacific, the heroine sings apologetically about being a cockeyed optimist. She admits she's immature and incurably green. This was an early version of a blonde joke. She confesses, as the giddy song soars melodically, that she's stuck like a dope on a thing called hope, and I can't get it out of my heart, not this heart. That's how our society has viewed optimists. They are dopes. Society thinks optimistic thinking is something that comes from the heart, not the head. Pessimists, on the other hand, are realistic. In fact, pessimists will never tell you they are pessimists. In their own minds, they are realists, and when they run into habitual optimists, they sneer at them for always blue-skying everything and not facing grim reality. Pessimists continually use their imaginations to visualize worst-case scenarios and then concluding that page_116, page 117. Those scenarios are lost causes. They take no action. That's why pessimism always leads to passivity. But even lying on his couch, bloated with junk food and foggy from too much television, the pessimist knows somewhere in his heart that his "what's the use?" attitude is not effective. He is living a life that is reflected in what Nietzsche once said: "Everything in the world displeased me, but what displeased me most was my displeasure with everything." Optimists have chosen to make a different use of the human imagination. They agree with Colin Wilson's point of view that imagination should be used not to escape from reality, but to create it. 54. Put on a good debate. Negative thinking is something we all do. The difference between the person who is primarily optimistic and the person who is primarily pessimistic is that the optimist learns to become a good debater. Once you become thoroughly aware of the effectiveness of optimism in your life, you can learn to debate your pessimistic thoughts. The most thorough and useful study I've ever seen on how to do this is contained in Dr. Martin Seligman's classical work, Learned Optimism. The studies done by Seligman demonstrate two very profound revelations. 1. Optimism is more effective than pessimism. And 2. Optimism can be learned. Seligman based his findings on years of statistical research. He studied professional and amateur athletes, insurance salespeople, and even politicians running for office. His scientific studies proved that optimists dramatically outperform pessimists. So what Norman Vincent Peale had been saying for years in his books on the power of positive thinking was finally proven to be scientifically true. Peale had based his books on testimonials and supportive biblical passages. The problem with that was that the people he needed to reach, the most skeptics and pessimists, were precisely the kinds of people who would not be anxious to take anything on faith. But once you've digested the remarkable writings of Seligman, you can go back and read Peale with a new sense of excitement. If you don't accept his religious references, it doesn't matter. The personal testimonials are stimulating enough to give his writing great power. Although his most famous book is The Power of Positive Thinking, I have derived much more motivation from Stay Alive All Your Life and the amazing results of positive thinking. If you are now skeptical about your power to debate your own pessimistic thoughts, keep in mind that most of us are already great debaters. If somebody comes in and takes one side of an argument, we can usually take the other side and make a case no matter which side the first person took. Debate teams have to learn to do this. Team members never know until the last second which side of the argument they will be debating, so they learn to be prepared to passionately argue either side. If you catch yourself brooding, worrying, and thinking pessimistically about an issue, the first step is to recognize your thoughts as being
pessimistic.
Not wrong or untrue, just pessimistic. And if you are going to get the most out of your biocomputer, the brain, you must acknowledge that pessimistic thoughts are less effective. Once you've accepted the pessimistic nature of your thinking, you are ready to take the next step. This first step is crucial, though. As Nathaniel Branden teaches, you can't leave a place you've never been. The second step is to build a case for the optimistic view. Start to argue against your first line of reasoning. Pretend you're an attorney whose job is to prove the pessimist in you wrong. Start off on building your case for what's possible. You'll surprise yourself. Optimism is by nature expansive. It opens door after door to what's possible. Pessimism is just the opposite. It is constrictive. It shuts the door on possibility. If you really want to open up your life and motivate yourself to succeed, become an optimistic thinker. 55. Make trouble work for you. One evening, many years ago, my then 14-year-old daughter Stephanie went for a walk with a friend, promising me she would be back home before 10 p.m. I didn't pay much attention to the clock until the 10 o'clock news ended, and I realized that she hadn't come home yet. I started to get nervous and irritated. I began pacing the house, wondering what to do. At 11:30, I got in my car and started cruising the neighborhood looking for her. My thoughts were understandably anxious, part fear and part anger. Finally, at 11:45, I drove back past my own house and saw her silhouette in the window. She was home and safe. But I kept driving. I realized that I was thinking completely pessimistically about the entire incident, and I needed to keep thinking before I talked to her. As I drove along, I observed all the pessimism I was wallowing in. She doesn't respect me. She can't keep a promise. My rules and requests mean nothing. This is the tip of the iceberg. I'm going to have problems with her for the next 4 years at least. Who knows where she went and what she was doing? Were drugs involved? Sex? Crime? I'm losing sleep over this. This is ruining my peace of mind and my life, etc. By recognizing how pessimistic my thoughts were, I was able to let the thoughts play completely out before taking a deep breath and telling myself, okay, that's one side of the argument. Now it's time to explore the other side. One of my favorite tricks for flipping my mind over to the optimistic side is to ask myself the question, how can I use this? How could I use this incident to improve my relationship with my daughter? How could I make my rules and requests more meaningful to us both? I began to build my case for optimism. I realized that great relationships are built by incidents like these.
They are not built by
theoretical conversations, but by difficult experiences and what we learn and gain from them. So I decided to drive a little while longer and let her wait inside. I was sure that by now her sister had told her that I was out looking for her, so she was now the one pacing and anxious. Let her sweat a little, I thought, while I continued to think things through. I continued to reflect upon my past relationship with Stephanie. One of the great aspects of it was Stephanie's honesty. She had always radiated a quiet and confident kind of serenity about life, and found it easy to be honest with her own feelings and honest with other people. Whenever there had been incidents with other children, teachers, or other parents involved in some misunderstanding, I could always count on Stephanie to tell me the truth. Asking her about what happened always saved me a lot of time. As I drove the dark neighborhood, I also ran through my happiest memories of Stephanie as a little girl, how much I loved her and how proud I was of her when I went to her concerts or talked to her teachers. I recalled the time in grade school when I embarrassed her by asking her principal if he would consider renaming the school after her. She had just won an academic award of some kind, and I was intoxicated with pride. Finally, my mind was completely won over to the optimistic side.
how
Can I use this? Gave me the idea that this incident could be made into something bigger than it seemed, a new commitment to each other to keep agreements and trust each other. When I finally got home, I could see that she was scared. She tried to blame the incident on her not having a watch.
she wanted me to.
Appreciate that, somehow, she was a victim of the whole incident.
I
Listened patiently, and then I told her I thought it was a much bigger deal than that. I talked about my relationship with her and how I had cherished her truthfulness throughout her childhood.
I told her that I
Thought we might have lost all of that tonight. That we might have to figure a way to start over. It's not that big a deal, she protested. But I told her that I thought it was a very big deal because it was all about our relationship and whether we were going to keep agreements with each other. I told Stephanie I wanted her to be as happy as she could possibly be. And the only way I could really help that happen would be if we kept agreements with each other. I told her how scared I was, how angry I was, how her staying out had ruled out a good night's sleep for me.
I
Asked her to try to understand. I talked about our life together when she was a little girl, and I reminded her how extraordinarily truthful she was. I mentioned a few incidents when she got in trouble, but how I had gone right to her for the truth and always got it. Page_121. Page 122. We talked for a long time that night, and she finally saw that coming. Home when she says she's coming home. Indeed, doing what she says she's going to do is a really big deal. It's everything. Since that incident and conversation, Stephanie has been extremely sensitive to keeping her word. If she goes out and promises to be back at a certain time, she takes along a watch or makes certain someone she's with has won. The incident that night is something neither of us will forget because it got us clear on the idea of trust and agreements. You could even say that it was a good thing. We have heard of so many incidents where bad events in retrospect were strokes of great fortune. A person who broke her leg skiing met a doctor in the hospital, fell in love, married him, and had a happy relationship for life. Because most of us have experienced a number of these incidents, we're aware of the dynamic. What seems bad, like a broken leg, turns out unexpectedly great. We begin to see the truth that every problem carries a gift inside it. By choosing to make use of seemingly bad events, you can access that gift much sooner. By asking yourself, how can I use this? Or what might be good about this? You can turn your life around on a dime. 56. Storm your own brain. The term brainstorming is now very well known in American business
life.
I first learned it many years ago when I worked as a copywriter in an ad agency. Whenever we would get a new account, our agency's president would get us all together to brainstorm for creative ideas for the
client.
The main rules of the brainstorming session are 1. There are no stupid ideas, the more unreasonable the better, and 2. Everyone must play. I have sometimes facilitated brainstorming sessions with business managers. We go around the table and each person puts out an idea and the facilitator writes it on the flip pad. We go around and around until all the reasonable ideas are exhausted and the unreasonable ideas start to flow. It is usually among the unreasonable ideas that something great is discovered. Brainstorming works so well because the usual restraints against stupidity are lifted. It's okay to be unreasonable and far out. What most people in business don't realize is that this powerful technique can be used by an individual alone with himself or herself.
I
first discovered this while driving in my car a number of years ago, listening to a motivational tape by Earl Nightingale.
He talked about a
system he had learned that worked wonders. On the top of a piece of paper, you put a problem you want solved or a
goal you want reached.
You then put numbers 1 through 20 on the paper and begin your brainstorming session.
The rules are the same as
with a group session. You have to list 20 ideas and they don't have to be well thought out or even reasonable. Give yourself permission to
flow.
Your only objective is to have 20 ideas scrawled down within a certain short amount of time. If you do this for a week, you will end up with 100 ideas. Are all of them usable? Of course not, but who cares? When you began the process, you probably didn't have any usable ideas. I have used this system myself over and over with really great results.
It
works so well because it relaxes the normal tensions against creative, outrageous thinking. It invites the right side of your brain to play along. Recently, a friend called for some advice about his career.
He was in
show business and had developed his act to the point where he was one of the top performers in the nation. His problem was marketing and self-promotion. That part of his career was lagging behind his talent. What if I told you that there is someone who can give you 100 specific marketing ideas tailored to your precise career and audience? I asked him. He was very interested. You, yourself, or that person, I said. I then told him about the list of 20 self-storming technique I had personally been using for a number of years. He eagerly jotted down the rules of the game and got busy playing. 2 weeks later, he called me very excited about the results. I've got some really great marketing ideas right now, more than I've ever had in
the past, he said.
Thanks. Self-mentoring is the best mentoring you can get because your mentor
knows you so well.
And although it's often beneficial to get specific outside personal coaching, the best coaching teaches us to look within. A great mentor once said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." 57. Keep changing your voice. There have been times when I have been told that I am lucky to have a good speaking voice. And some people are impressed that I rarely use a microphone in my seminars, even with hundreds of people in the audience. People will conclude that I have been blessed with a powerful set of vocal cords, but it is not true.
As I
related in an earlier chapter, my voice used to be no better than a feeble monotone. That is, until I got motivated to change it. There were 2 instances that inspired my system for developing my voice. The first was a magazine interview I read many years ago about the actor Richard Burton, who had perhaps the most mesmerizing speaking voice of all time. Listen to the Broadway recording of Camelot and hear him as King Arthur speak and sing his songs. In the interview, Burton said that his voice was how he made his living, so he made certain that each morning while showering he sang a number of songs to keep his vocal cords strong and supple. Later, on a television talk show, actor Tony Randall told the host how he developed his trademark sing-song acting voice. "I took up opera," he said. "I found that singing opera did more for my stage voice than anything else I ever tried." Those two interviews have stayed in my mind ever since, and I always carry a number of tapes and CDs in my car to sing along with. I crank them up good and loud. This is best done while driving alone, and sing at the top of my lungs. I make certain that I do this every day, even when I don't feel like singing. In the words of William James, there's another benefit. We don't sing because we're happy because we sing. Prior to a major public speech, I'll often get to my location more than an hour ahead of time and then just drive around the neighborhood singing like a madman. Sometimes I worry that my host client might drive by and spot me in my car singing along with Elvis and looking dangerously psychotic. But the benefits are worth that risk. I find that when I drive and sing like that, my breathing is better, my timing is better, and when I speak, my voice effortlessly fills the hall. You might think, I don't speak for a living, so such a weird practice might not be necessary for you. But we all speak. A pleasant, relaxed, and strong speaking voice is a priceless asset to anyone whose job involves communicating with other humans. When referring to people whose speaking voices are pleasing to listen to, many people use words like melodious and well-modulated. This is a good hint to tell if someone is complimenting a great speaking voice. You are not stuck with the voice you have now. Start singing, and soon, you'll be creating the voice you'd like to have. The stronger your voice, the stronger your confidence, and the stronger your confidence, the easier it is to motivate yourself. 58. Embrace the new frontier. Fortunately, for all of us, a new frontier is upon us. Because our nation and world has entered the information age, the old patterns for living are gone. An article by business writer John Huey appeared in the June 27, 1994 edition of Fortune. In it, Huey observed, "Let's say you're going to a party, so you pull out some pocket change and buy a little greeting card. That plays happy birthday when it's opened. After the party, someone casually tosses the card into the trash, throwing away more computer power than existed in the entire world before 1950. In the old paradigm, forged in the industrial age, we human beings became less and less useful and adventurous. We found lifelong employment in guaranteed jobs and did our jobs the same way until retirement. Then, once we reached retirement age, we became thoroughly useless to society and lived lives dependent on the government, our relatives, or our own savings that we accumulated in our useful years. Now, with the technological explosion and entry into the information age, employers are no longer as interested in our job histories as they used to be. They are now more interested in our current capabilities. One of the romantic appeals of the early Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett frontier days in our nation was the usefulness of individuals. If you were living out on the frontier, farming, cooking, and hunting, and you turned 65, it would never occur to anyone to ask you to retire. We have finally come back to those days of honoring usefulness over age and status. For example, if my company is trying to enter the Chinese market to sell its software and you, at age 70, can speak fluent Chinese, know all about software, and have energy and a zest for success, how can I afford to ignore you? Bill Gates of Microsoft has said, "Our company has only one asset: human imagination." If you took all of Microsoft's buildings, real estate, office hardware, physical assets, anything you can touch, away from the company, where would it be? Almost exactly where it is now. Because in today's world, a company's value is in its thinking, not in its possessions. This is great news for the individual because usefulness is back in
style.
If you can cultivate your skills, keep learning new things, study computers, learn a foreign language, or become expert in a foreign culture and market, you can make yourself useful. The great basketball coach John Wooden recommended that we live by this credo, especially apt for the new technological frontier. Learn as if you were to live forever. Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Gone are the days when your employability depended primarily on your job history, your school ties, your connections, your family, or your seniority. Today, your employability depends on one thing, your current skills. And those skills are completely under your control. This is the new frontier. And where we once entered retirement age, nervous about the wolves at our door, today, with a commitment to lifelong growth through learning, we can be as useful to the world community as we are motivated to be. The more we learn about the future, the more motivated we become to be a valuable part of it. 59. Upgrade your old habits. Supermotivation is much more difficult to achieve when we are held back mentally by bad habits, trying to move toward the life we want, while dragging along our bad habits was described in the Scottish rock group Del Amitri's song lyrics. It's like driving with the brakes on, it's like swimming with your boots on. But here's the catch. Bad habits simply cannot be broken, nor can they be gotten rid of. Ask the millions who continue to try. They always end up, in the words of Richard Brautigan, trying to shovel mercury with a pitchfork, because our bad habits exist for good reasons. They're there to do something for us, even if that something ends up being self-destructive. Down deep, even a bad habit is trying to make us operate better. People who smoke are trying, even through their addiction, to do something beneficial, perhaps to breathe deeply and relax. Such breathing is needed to balance stress, so their smoking is a way in which they are trying to make themselves better. Bad habits are like that. They are based on a perceived benefit. That's why they're so hard to just get rid of. That's why habits must be respected and understood before they can be transformed. What created the habit must be built upon, not killed. We must go to the beneficial impulse that drives the habit and then expand on that to make the habit grow from something bad into something good. Let's take drinking as an example. I've known people who used to be drunk all the time who are now sober all the time. How did they do it? Couldn't we just say that they just got rid of their drinking habit? Not really. Because, without exception, the recovered people I know replace their drinking with something else. Taking all of one's courage, relaxation, and spirituality from a bottle of alcohol is a very damaging habit, but to simply eliminate it leads to even worse problems: shakes, DTs, fear, dread, paranoia. A total void. People who join Alcoholics Anonymous, however, replace their false courage, once found in a bottle of alcohol, with real courage found in the meeting rooms of AA. The completely artificial sense of spirituality formerly found in a tumbler of spirits is replaced by the true and deeply personal spirituality found in working the 12-step program of enlightenment. The superficial but highly emotional relationships the alcoholic had made in his favorite bars are replaced by real friendships. Replacement is powerful because it works, and where bad habits are concerned, it's the only thing that works. I've known people who quit smoking without intending to. They took up running or some form of regular aerobic exercise, and soon the breathing and relaxation they were getting from the exercise made the smoking feel bad to their bodies. They quit smoking because they had introduced a replacement. People who diet have the same experience. It isn't staying away from fattening food that works. It's introducing a regular diet of delicious, healthy food that works. It's replacement. Subconsciously, you don't think your bad habits are bad. And that's because they're filling a perceived need. So the way to strengthen yourself is to identify the need and honor it. Honor the need by replacing the current habit with one that is healthier and more effective. Replace one habit, and soon you'll be motivated to replace another. 60. Paint your masterpiece today. Think of your day as a blank artist's canvas. If you go through your day passively accepting whatever other people and circumstances splatter on your canvas, you will more than likely see a mess where art could be. If the mess troubles your sleep, your next new day will begin in a state of fatigue and mild confusion. From such a state, your canvas will be splattered all the more with shapes you don't like and colors you never
chose.
Thinking of your day as a painter's canvas will allow you to be more conscious of what is happening to you when you flood your mind with nothing but internet gossip, commercials on the radio, the latest murder trial, your spouse's criticisms, office politics, and pessimistic musical lyrics. If you'll allow yourself to step back far enough to realize and truly see that your daily canvas is filling up with all these negative things, a certain freedom occurs. It's the freedom to choose something better. The more conscious we are of our freedom to paint whatever we want on our canvas, the less we go through life as a victim of circumstances. Many of us aren't even aware of our own victim status. We read whatever's on the coffee table, listen to whatever's on the car radio, eat whatever's handy, scan whatever's on the internet, talk to whomever calls us on the phone, and watch whatever's on the television, often too passive to even click the remote control. We must be aware that we have it in us to change all that. We can paint our day our way. The best time management or day painting course I ever took was taught by Dennis Deaton. His seminar's main point is that we can't manage time. We can only manage ourselves. Clear the clutter from your mind, Deaton says, and remove the obstacles to greater success. While most time management courses feel like courses in engineering, Deaton has captured the spirit of the artist in his teaching. His prescriptions for managing your day all stem from goal creation and living the visions you create. Wake up and visualize your day as a blank canvas. Ask yourself, who's the artist today? Blind circumstance or me? If I choose to be the artist, how do I want to paint my day? 61. Swim laps underwater. When Bobby Fischer prepared for his World Championship chess match with Boris Spassky, he prepared by swimming laps underwater every
day.
He knew that as the chess matches wore on into the late hours, the player with the most oxygen going to his brain would have the mental advantage. So he built his chess game by building his lungs. When he defeated Spassky, many were surprised by his astonishing wit and mental staying power, especially late in the matches when both players should have been weary and burned out. What kept Bobby Fischer alert wasn't caffeine or amphetamines, it was his breathing. General George Patton once gave a lecture to his troops on brain power. He, too, knew the connection between breathing and thinking. In war, as in peace, a man needs all the brains he can get, said Patton. Nobody ever had too many brains. Brains come from oxygen. Oxygen comes from the lungs where the air goes when we breathe. The oxygen in the air gets into the blood and travels to the brain. Any fool can double the size of his lungs. I learned about Patton's passion for teaching his troops deep breathing from Porter Williamson. I had once written a few political radio and television commercials that caught Mr. Williamson's attention, so he called me and asked me to lunch one day. Because he had identified himself as the author of Patton's principles, I eagerly accepted his invitation, having coincidentally read the marvelous book a few weeks earlier. Williamson had served in the Army for many years as Patton's most trusted legal advisor. Williamson told me many stories about serving with Patton and how truly extraordinary a motivator the general was. Most of the Patton quotes in this book come from Williamson's own memories of his service with the great general. Williamson told me about how he himself had lost his leg to bone cancer and how the doctors had erroneously forecasted his death twice. His inner strength, he said, often came from the inspiration he received in his days of serving with Patton. Frequently, General Patton would stop at my desk, recalled Williamson, and ask how long you been sitting at that desk. Get up and get out of here. Your brain stops working after you sit in a swivel chair for 20 minutes.
Keep the body
Moving around so the juices will run to the right places. It'll be good for the brain. If you sit in that chair too long, all of your brain power will be in your shoes. You cannot keep your mind active when your body is inactive. That one principle, an active mind cannot exist in an inactive body, became Bobby Fischer's secret weapon in winning the world championship of chess. Who would have guessed that swimming underwater would make you a better chess player? Certainly not the overweight, worn-out chess genius Boris Spassky. Sometimes, all you need is the air that you breathe to motivate yourself. Going for a run or a walk or simply deep breathing gives the brain the fuel it feeds on to be newly refreshed and creative.